Hello everybody, Kyle O here. This is a sort of change of pace for me on here, but this is something I wanted to do. It just came to me and I figured, you know what? I'm going to talk about a classic Pixar favorite, an element of a perennial favorite that I feel doesn't get elaborated on. The subject is one of their most popular go-to films, which is Andrew Stanton's 2003 Ocean Odyssey, Finding Nemo. And I'll specifically be talking about the film's brilliant use of space to drive its storytelling. Before I start, I just want to say that Finding Nemo is one of my favorite Pixar films, and I suspect that it's a favorite for a lot of people, some 17 to 18 years after its release. The movie will turn 18 on May 30th. Repeat viewings of Monsters, Inc. made me fall in love with Pixar, so naturally Finding Nemo's release was like a big event for me. I think it's a wonderful adventure story in a very classic sense, but told in the usual clever Pixar way, with great characters, ace character animation, wonderful backgrounds and art direction, and just really good directing and staging from Andrew Stanton. This was his first full directorial debut after co-directing on A Bug's Life. He makes a damn impressive debut with it. It's a fantastic story about how beautiful and how harsh nature can be, and how it takes a toll on its main character, Marlin, and how, through his epic adventure with the hilarious and forgetful Dory, he becomes a better parent and learns to confront all of his fears that he had succumbed to after the death of his wife, Coral. Meanwhile, all the sequences of Nemo, stuck in the tank in the dentist's office, break up the adventure. Very well done sequences that also develop Nemo as a character in parallel to Marlin, and how he ups his game and learns things from Gil and the tank gang that in turn help him, Marlin, and Dory in the climactic set piece with the fishing boat. It all comes together very nicely over the course of 100 minutes. It's so well paced, and the score by Thomas Newman is eclectic and mesmerizing. Voice cast is inspired. It's just an example of a great animated adventure. It's just as great now as it was in 2003 and beyond. After the first act is over, Finding Nemo is split into two distinct kinds of settings. Marlin and Dory travel the Great Barrier Reef off of Australia to find the former's fish-napped son, Nemo, who is in an aquarium in a dentist's office across from Sydney. I want to talk about the dentist's office sequences in particular first. Visually, the simple exam room effectively feels kinda claustrophobic, as if the office is the tank itself, emphasizing just how trapped Nemo is. Not only far from home and above his natural habitat, but enclosed in a space that's already enclosed inside of a tight space. And something else that I never see get brought up, you barely see the outside environment surrounding Philip Sherman's building. If Pixar made this movie recently, I think you would have seen that. But you don't, and I'd say that was always for the better. Being Pixar's fifth ever film, and a film that sought to make strides in rendering water and aquatic animals, convincingly, it makes sense that Philip Sherman's building is a decidedly small set. The filmmakers likely had to keep their virtual camera inside of it. For starters, we never see the exterior of the building and what kind of neighborhood it is located in. 8 years earlier, we got a whole ongoing neighborhood for Toy Story. Also, there was no outside shot of the window, and the window only. A scene of Nigel hurrying to bring the news and flying straight into the exam room window is smartly shot facing him, with the camera pulling back till it's in the room. There are never any shots of the coast, and when we see the road, it's very rare that we do. Gil's POV escape plan shows the road briefly, and also the Pizza Planet truck, and since it's a POV sequence, we only see straight ahead. An awning, some bushes, the road, and then the water. This location is right on the water. At the very end of the film, we see the tank gang in the water after their successful escape. The angle this final scene is shot at obscures the building. All we can see above the foundation of the road is the sky. Pixar staff probably knew that designing an entire coastal neighborhood in addition to all the ocean sets in the harbor would have likely added more time and maybe even costs to the project. Interestingly, Finding Nemo came in at $94 million, which was $21 million less than what the previous film, Monsters, Inc. cost to make. For one, it would have probably meant more humans to portray. We were still in an era where humans in computer animated films are arguably not yet perfected. The Incredibles came right after Finding Nemo. Some, including myself, consider The Incredibles to be a big step forward for humans in CGI films. But interestingly, Finding Nemo gets little regard in this context. Finding Nemo has two main humans, Philip Sherman and niece Darla, who to me always look like a combination of Sid and Boo, and a couple of extras inside and outside the dentist's building. And I'd say for 2003, they don't look too bad. It's the bridge between earlier CG human efforts and what we saw in The Incredibles. I assume it was an economic decision to keep land settings to a minimum in Finding Nemo. On the film's audio commentary, director Stanton and his crew originally intended to have the seagull pursuit set piece in the city of Sydney itself. But that would have meant creating an entire city just for that one sequence, so they opted for a fairly big harbor dockyard set instead. Of course, a year and a half later, The Incredibles had the then very impressive Municiberg metropolis. A lot of the film is set in that city, though. At the time, The Incredibles also contained the most sets for a CG animated film, surpassing previous record holder Shrek. Toy Story 2 presumably has little beyond the block with Al's penthouse and his conveniently across the street toy emporium. Monsters, Inc. has Metropolis, but that's but a neighborhood or two, with a matte painting depicting a cityscape. Finding Nemo similarly uses a matte painting for all the distant Sydney shots. Interestingly, we see the water treatment plant amidst a rocky coast in the film in a few sequences. That's about it. In fact, the film was originally going to have a lengthy sequence of Nemo surviving his trip through the treatment plant, but it was instead left as a scene of Nemo flying down a few chutes and into a giant pipe. Edited well, it is all you need to see. Nowadays, Pixar probably would have made that whole scene. I feel this all, whether intentionally or not, emphasizes just how trapped and far away Nemo is. After all, film is a visual medium, animation is no different, and sometimes subtle choices like these enhance what's already working. Even within the building itself, the angles are rather limited as well. Almost all the shots in the exam room completely avoid the hallway to the waiting room, a part of the set that you can fly through on the old DVD menu on Disc 2 when accessing the special features. The waiting room shots similarly avoid that space as well. I feel that the cuts imposed by CGI's limitations in that era can sometimes enhance a computer-animated movie, and I feel that this is the case with Finding Nemo's above-water sequences. By contrast, all of the ocean sequences with Marlin and Dory trying to find the right way to get to Nemo are big and wide. No enclosure there, save for the thrilling sequences set in the sunken submarine, the deep trench, and the mouth of the whale. Lovely vistas, spacious locations, sometimes that openness gives the ocean a very airy feel. Anything could be out there. Much emphasized by the film's opening sequence with the Barracuda attack. Even a light-hearted moment where Marlin and Dory consult a school of moonfish can feel uncomfortable because this particular seabed isn't covered in rock formations, plants, anemones, corals, and whatnot. Only the tube-like East Australian current, populated to the brim with easygoing sea turtles, provides some form of safety for Marlin and Dory. Otherwise, every other sequence has them vulnerable, and Stanton and the filmmakers take advantage with several sequences. On top of that, I think there's something very subtle here as well. Marlin, of course, is terrified of everything, and, you can't blame him, but he is very much anti-everything. On that first day of school, he's hovering all over Nemo like a helicopter parent. He is just overbearing and just utterly afraid of what could happen to his son and just how open, the ocean is and what dangers await. Whereas Nemo isn't like that at all. Nemo's adventurous. Nemo wants to see the amazing world of the reef. And interestingly, Finding Nemo places these two characters in sets that represent the exact opposites of who they are. Nemo, the adventurous son, is in a very, very closed environment, whereas Marlin, the closed-minded and terrified, is out in the open, embarking on a big adventure. I think it's a very interesting dichotomy at play. On the bonus features for the film, Andrew Stanton had often talked about the duality that he had wanted to portray in his film, the beauty of nature, but also the harshness of it. Something harkening back to films like Walt Disney's Bambi, and other examples where nature can be simultaneously beautiful and breathtaking, but also terrifying and ruthless. Finding Nemo always struck that fine balance to me. It is at times a gorgeous and beautiful film, but at other times it's also pretty dark and harrowing, and there is lots of danger. And the film balances the sense of wonder, comic relief, and good drama. There's a reason why it's a perennial favorite Pixar film. And it was one hell of a start for Andrew Stanton as well. Andrew Stanton was the co-director of A Bug's Life before Finding Nemo. And A Bug's Life is a similarly big-scale adventure movie, with wide shots and very pretty vistas and whatnot. And I feel that a lot of what he learned on A Bug's Life, he ported over to Finding Nemo. And in turn, what he learned on Finding Nemo, he literally took that to space. Outer space with Wall-E. And in turn, I think Wall-E influenced some of the filmmaking decisions that we saw in Finding Dory. Not to mention, 13 years later, the technology is a lot different and allowed Stanton to make bigger scenes. And while I do admire and respect Finding Dory as a film, part of me does wonder if Finding Dory had been made in the same era as Finding Nemo, and they didn't have as much freedom with such shots, how would that film have been? Finding Dory is an interestingly much more open film than Finding Nemo is, and a lot of the sequences involving humans, and there are plenty of them, plus plenty of humans, a lot of those sequences are very big and wide, and they don't feel so enclosed like the dentist's office set. And we see the environment outside of the institute, all kinds of sets. We lose the bigness of the ocean worlds, and instead we are treated to the enclosed bigness of marine life institution tanks. It is an interesting and welcome change of pace from Finding Nemo, so that it doesn't act as a carbon copy of Finding Nemo, save for sequences where characters make reappearances, such as crushing the turtles. But in Andrew Stanton's filmography, and for Pixar's lineup too, Finding Nemo remains a gem. What can you say about Finding Nemo that's never been said? Well, I tried. Anyways, I feel that Finding Nemo is a great example of what you could do with less, in an era where CGI was advancing, but still didn't have everything at its disposal just yet. And sometimes I wonder, can other CG movies take cues from these early Pixars and some of these other early CG films? I know it's tempting to show massive sets, it's tempting to fly the camera around everywhere and really show off, strut your stuff, but also coming up with creative shots and making your locations even more immersive can sometimes tell a story very effectively.